Kids, my dad said, glancing at both Maddie and me in turn. What we're getting on now is the US, Route 50, the loneliest stretch of road in all of America. What does that mean? Maddie asked, leaning forward so that her head was between my dad and me in the front seats. It means that once we get a little further along this road, we aren't gonna see very many people for a long while. All the way to Grandma's house, I asked. Almost. Maddie slumped back into her seat, leaned her head against the window, and closed her eyes. I looked out at the world around us. To the left and right was just dirt and grass, as if no one had ever touched this place at all. They'd made a road so we could travel through it to get to places like our grandma's house, but besides that, they'd left it all alone. Out in the distance, straight ahead, I could see the outline of mountains piercing the dark blue sky, like someone had taken out a pencil and drawn dark lines, both ragged and perfect. I admired it all as I wondered how the world could be so beautiful. I was only 12, and I hadn't been raised Christian in the slightest, but I started to think that there was no way someone hadn't created all this with an artist's touch. It was just too perfect. Dad, I said, is there such a thing as God? The faintest smile crossed his lips. Why do you ask? It looks like a painting out there. Don't you think someone would have had to make this? It's beautiful. He laughed. It is beautiful. I'm glad that's not lost on you. So, is there a God? Well, David, do you think there is? I don't know. Neither do I. But what do you think, Dad? He was quiet for a while as he scanned the scenery around us. I try not to think about it too much. Either there is or there isn't. If you would have asked me earlier, I probably would have said I didn't think so. But now I think that if God is real, he's definitely an artist. God isn't real, said Maddie from the back seat. I turned to see that she was staring at me blankly. If he was, he wouldn't have let Mom die. I took a deep breath, holding in tears. Dad, Mom died driving to Grandma's house, right? Yes. Does that mean she was on this road? He tried to speak, faltered, then sighed and said, yeah, just a little bit ahead of where we are now. If God is real, I said, then maybe he isn't a good guy. We all got silent, and my dad started to drive a little faster. As Grandma opened the door to greet us, she let out a sigh of relief, as if she were holding her breath, unsure if we'd make it. Oh, how excited I am to see you, she said, but her face didn't light up until after she'd finished talking. She gave each of us a hug, then ushered us into the dining room, where she'd already set out silverware and plates. As we sat, she went into the kitchen to fetch the just finished turkey that we were having for dinner. Why don't you go see if your grandmother needs some help, David? My dad said after she didn't come back for a couple minutes. You need any help, Grand? As I turned the corner into the kitchen, Grandma was frantically shoving books, crystals, and what appeared to be several scattered decks of playing cards off the counters and into a bin. When I spoke, she jumped and with one clean sweep of her arm knocked the remainder of the items in with the rest. She crouched down and shoved the bin under the sink. What was all that? I asked. Nothing, she said, but when she saw I wasn't convinced, she continued in a lower tone. Do you believe in ghosts? I don't know. Well, I do, and I'm trying to figure out a way to talk to your mother. Don't tell your father about this, okay? Why not? It might creep him out, she said. He might tell me to stop. You're old enough to understand that this could be considered abnormal, right? Yeah, I said. Dad said we won't ever get to see her again. That might be true, she said, but it's worth a shot, right? I guess. She got closer to me and bent down so that our faces were level. Then she clasped her hands around mine. I'm gonna need your help tomorrow, okay? Just don't tell your dad. Okay, I said. I won't. Dinner went about as you'd expect for a grieving family. Grandma and Dad tried to get through basic conversation, but it was clear neither of them felt like talking. Mom's funeral had been less than 3 weeks prior, and they'd never gotten along well anyway. That didn't change at all after the accident. In fact, looking back, I think Grandma blamed Dad for Mom's death. My parents had been in a fight when Mom decided to spend the weekend at Grandma's house. It was of course on her drive there that she'd had the accident. I remember the way my dad screamed when he got the news. It was like he was watching her die in front of him. A sharp cracking, no, like he was begging someone to stop as furniture and glass fell around him. I knew she was dead before I left my room. Even at my age, I knew that a cry of pain like that could only mean death. I'd gone directly to Maddie's room and found her sitting in bed with a book open, though she was just staring at the wall. Why'd Dad yell? She asked. I don't know, I said, then hugged her. Usually she'd have yelled at me just for going into her room, but she only hugged me back. We walked downstairs, and Dad told us everything. He was too shocked and hurt to even soften the delivery. She had been less than 5 miles from Grandma's house when it happened. He'd gotten the details from a combination of witnesses who saw the accident and the EMTs who arrived on scene. She'd been driving on the right side of a one-way road when a dog ran out in front of her. She'd swerved to the right to avoid it. She'd have driven into a field of grass and most likely been fine, except she'd panicked and overcorrected by turning hard left into oncoming traffic. A 18-wheeler hit her head-on, and she flipped several times before coming to a stop upside down on the side of the road. It wasn't clear at what point she lost consciousness, but she probably died listening to the trucker and several other passerbys frantically trying to get into the vehicle, while the ambulance took over 20 minutes to arrive. After dinner, Grandma practically forced us all to bed. "I'm sure you had a long drive," she said. "I'll show you all to your rooms and let you get some rest." She took my dad to the master bedroom and insisted on taking the guest room next to the room with bunk beds that Maddie and I were sharing. I fell asleep almost immediately, but woke up to Grandma standing beneath me and over Maddie's head. "Wake up, you two," she said in an urgent whisper. I looked out the window and saw that it was pitch black outside. "Grandma," I said, "it's the middle of the night." She told us that she needed our help with something very important, but that afterwards we could go back to sleep, and later we'd have fun for the entire day. "We're gonna go on a picnic, get ice cream, and go to an arcade," she said. "And at the end of the night we'll come back here and watch a scary movie." She looked at Maddie and whispered as if Dad was in the room. "I know your father doesn't usually let you watch those." "Dad lets us watch whatever," Maddie said, irritated and tired. "Mom didn't let us watch horror movies." "Well, your mom was a smart woman." She stood straight up. "Now come on, get up and meet me in the garage." "What do you think she needs help with?" Maddie asked after Grandma stepped out of the room. "I don't know," I said, but I had a strange feeling it was something we weren't supposed to tell Dad about. We walked into the garage to find that it was dimly lit only by 3 candles arranged in a small circle. In front of each candle was a wooden chair, the kind you typically see in dining rooms. In one of the chairs sat Grandma, and when saw us she smiled and said, "Don't be scared, take your seats." We did, and saw that Grandma was holding a thick book in her lap. It was too dark to tell what the title was. "What are we doing?" Maddie asked. "Just do what I say," Grandma responded. "Everything is gonna be okay. No matter what happens, just stay in your chair." "What's going to happen?" I asked. "It'll be easier if I just read it to you," she said, then took a deep breath before looking at the book. She spoke in a reverent voice I'd never heard from her before, as if she were delivering a sermon. "The spirit Mortisar has been known throughout history to be capable of resurrecting the dead. While his origin is unknown, details of his workings are depicted in ancient texts stretching back thousands of years. A journal found in Karnak claims that the entity arrived as an angel, showered those present with gifts, and brought back people who had died at war. Another text claims that when a family tried to bring back a lost boy, Mortisar demanded a tribute, then laughed as he had the 2 poor souls fight for their place in the world." Maddie and I locked eyes. She was gripping the arms of her chair so tightly that her body was shaking. I tried to comfort her with a smile, but my lips were quivering. Grandma continued from the book. "Most written records depict Mortisar to be kind and giving." She raised her voice so that she was almost yelling. "In the cases where he isn't, it's often reported that the ritual was performed less than perfectly. Maybe a party member rose from their chair too early, maybe the room wasn't properly salted, or perhaps they weren't connected by string. It is suggested that anyone wishing to summon Mortisar do so with the utmost respect and attention to detail." She bowed her head and went silent for several seconds before looking up at us. "You two love your mother, right?" Maddie was nodding. In the dim light I could see wet streaks running down her face as she breathed in a gasp. "Loved," I said, looking at Grandma with a face that I hoped said, "Leave us alone." She either didn't notice or didn't care. We all loved her so much. We have the chance to bring her back if we're careful. I looked again at Maddie. She was quietly crying and trying so hard not to show it. She didn't need to go through this. She needed to finish grieving and move on with her life. I willed myself to get up, but I felt frozen to my seat. I should have been able to help her. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I know she couldn't hear me. "It's important that you listen carefully," Grandma continued. "Act carefully and do exactly as I say." She turned her attention back to the book. "Gather a group of people who love the deceased dearly and head to a place where you can obtain complete darkness. Create a circle of light, one fixture for each person. Candles are fine, but anything that fits the description will work. Have the group sit in a larger circle outside of the light. Once everyone is seated, one person is permitted to stand and carry out the following tasks. She stood as she continued to read. Create a thick circle of salt around each member of the group. My heart pulsed in my ears as she reached under her seat and grabbed a can of salt before pouring it in a circle around each chair, starting with her own and ending with mine. As she walked past me, I could hear her whispering, "Mortisar, Mortisar, Mortisar." I held my breath as I looked around the room frantically. The shadows seemed to suggest that someone could pop out at any moment. Next, connect the group with a string or rope. She locked eyes with Maddie, then me. No one should let go until the ritual is over. She put the book down and reached under her chair once more, coming out with a spool of string and sharp knife. She unwound the string as she circled us, tying a knot tightly around each of our hands. She sat back and opened the book once more. Finally, blow out the candles. When you are in complete darkness, each member of the group may give their message to Mortisar. You may say whatever you like, so much as you each use his name. No one may get up until he permits you to do so. "Ready?" she asked. "Grandma," I started. Maddie interrupted. "Will this really work?" She was pleading, and now openly crying. "It's not just a game. Just trust me," Grandma said. "Now blow out your candles." We let the room fall into complete darkness. I put my hand out in front of me, wiggled my fingers, but saw nothing. The world seemed to become quieter as our breaths became a collective. A breeze ran through me, and I almost jumped. "Just your imagination," I thought. "Maybe Grandma's breath." "Mortisar," Grandma started, "we gather before you in hopes that you will bless us with the return of our lost love. My daughter, the mother of these two beautiful children. If it is within your power, we have the strength to do whatever is asked of us." "Mortisar," I said. My throat was dry and my voice cracked. "Please bring my mom back. I promise to love her more than ever. I'll do whatever you ask." "Mortisar," Maddie said, "please don't let her be alone. Bring my mom back to us. Tell her we love her. Tell her to come home." We sat in silence for a minute. Then too, I felt like I was existing in some sort of sensory deprivation. No sound, no sight, I couldn't even feel anything. There was a crash from the corner of the room. All of us screamed as my senses came flooding back. "Don't get up," Grandma yelled. I couldn't even if I tried. One candle reignited brighter and larger than should have been possible. It was for a second the size of a bonfire, and so hot I felt my skin would burn. The next second it was dim as the flame of a lighter. It fluctuated between the two states as the events continued. In glimpses I could see Maddie kicking her feet with her mouth wide open, yet she stayed completely silent. A hand grabbed me by the back of the shoulder, cold and wet, like the skin of a snake. In my panic I ignored the rules and tried to get up, but then there was a second hand, and I was being pushed down so hard I feared the chair would break. I looked straight ahead to see Grandma, writhing, her chair rocking back and forth, threatening to fall. The hands unclasped from my shoulders, and the entity walked out in front of me and knocked over the candles. He stood in a flame that came from nowhere, but lit up the room enough so that I could see him, Maddie, and Grandma, but nothing else. Mortisar appeared at first as a man. As the flames went up and down, he was a young boy with a mischievous smile, a young girl holding a decapitated doll, and finally, a skeletal figure with black bones and a red face. "You are much too foolish for your own good," he said, his voice calm, but booming as if from speakers. "This ritual was meant to have been lost long ago. I've stopped working with your kind. My family," Grandma said. "We've passed down this book for generations." "No," Mortisar screamed. There were more crashes. Maddie fell backwards and tumbled out of her chair. He walked to Grandma, towering over her. He ripped the book from her and tossed it into the fire. "He will not argue. I am obligated to give you a deal, and you are obligated to accept. One of you will die so that your loved one may rise." I cried out and rose from my chair. In an instant he was on me. He grabbed me by the throat with one wet and bony hand and raised me so that my feet dangled by his head. "Say that you accept," he screamed. "I accept," I coughed. He turned in a circle, waiting. "I accept," Maddie cried, getting back into her chair. "I volunteer," said Grandma, raising her hand. He dropped me to the floor. "You don't get to choose." He turned his attention to Maddie and pointed at her with a finger that was slowly taking the shape of a sharp knife. Maddie screamed and cried. "Grandma, and I rose from our seats and started towards them, but the fire grew so large that they were lost from our vision. She's dead, I thought, and fell to my knees. But just then the door opened, the light turned on, and we all screamed. But when I looked back at Maddie, Mortisar was gone. What the hell is going on in here? My dad yelled. He took in the candles, the chairs, the salt, and the string. He hadn't seen Mortisar, but it clearly looked like we were doing something satanic. I guess that we were. Maddie ran towards him and wrapped him in a hug. I was crying, but tried to explain everything that happened. Thought it came out gibberish. And he interrupted me by turning to Grandma. What did you have my kids doing? You wouldn't understand, she said. And now you ruined it. He's gonna come back. None of us are safe. You're crazy, my dad said. No, Dad, I tried to interrupt, but he talked over me. Jamie told me about you and your fake witchcraft. It's real, Maddie yelled. He was gonna kill me. You don't understand what you're doing, Grandma said. He'll only be gone for a few minutes. We've already broken so many rules. He'll kill us all. We have to start again. My dad ignored her. Come on, kids, we're leaving. No, you can't, Grandma yelled. Maddie and I locked eyes. We didn't know who to listen to, but our love and trust for our father had us following him back inside the house. As we grabbed our things and prepared to leave, Grandma followed us around the house trying desperately to explain. But as we got closer to the front door, her explanations turned into apologies. By the time we were climbing into the car, she was saying simply, "I'm sorry," over and over again. As we began driving home, I didn't have the energy to explain what happened, and neither did Maddie, apparently. Dad didn't bother asking. I simply closed my eyes and silently prayed to a God I wasn't sure was real, begging him to keep us safe. We were less than 30 minutes into the ride home, and I, miraculously, was starting to fall asleep. I closed my eyes, rested my head against the cool glass, and started breathing in rhythm with the soft bumps of the road. But then the car started to jerk, a little to the left, a little to the right. What the hell? My dad said. I opened my eyes to see a thick boned arm reaching from the back seat around my dad, its hand gripping around the steering wheel. Mortisar was turning the wheel, left, right, laughing. Oh my God, I screamed. Maddie reached toward Mortisar and attempted to pull him away, but he hardly noticed her. Stop, she yelled. Just some car trouble, guys, my dad said. Let me just pull over. But as he pressed the brake, the wheel jerked hard to the right, then to the left. My dad fought, but it was to no avail. The first car we saw since leaving Grandma's came speeding towards us just as we spun into the left lane, twisting all the way around so that it hit the driver's side first. We flipped and rolled. It was like free falling off a tall building, except windows exploded, and glass fell all around. I was cut and stabbed, bruised and crushed by parts of the car pushing in on me. Screams and cries of terror and pain from my family and the other car blended together. We finally stopped rolling, but my world was still spinning. I tried to look around, but all I saw was bright light. Dad, I said. Maddie, are you guys okay? I'm still not sure if I actually made any sound at all. My eyes twitched open and shut, but the light never ceased. I tried to move, but I didn't know where to go. Everything hurt, and I couldn't tell where I was. I felt a cold, slimy hand grip my neck as the light started to fade to darkness. I closed my eyes, giving in, but then a voice, one I hadn't heard in what felt like so long. David, my mom said. I love you, baby, don't give up. The pain was gone. I opened my eyes. We were high above the world in the beautiful blue sky. I was lying on a soft cloud as my mom stood over me. Where are we? I asked. I'm not sure, honey, but I'm here. I promised I always would be. Everything started to shake. I fell down from the cloud and into a pit of darkness. The garage, lit only by one candle. I was lying on a bed of rusty nails as pain enveloped me and Mortisar stood over me, his red face cracking into a bloody smile. Then my mother, crashing into the room from above, tackled Mortisar to the floor. They rolled and fought, my mother punching him with more power than she ever could have had in life. He stabbed her with his pointy fingers, and they both screamed in pain and in rage. I tried to get up. I needed to help her. I needed to kill Mortisar. Maybe I could even save Maddie and Dad, too, but I was sinking into the bed of nails. I couldn't move. Mortisar ended up on top of my mom and pinned her to the ground, but his attention was on me as he stabbed her again and again with his sharp pointed fingers. Our eyes locked, and I saw my mom lying in her car, bleeding profusely from a wound in her neck as she screamed for help that would never arrive. Then Mortisar screamed in pain. I was at the park with my mom. She was pushing me on the swing, and I screamed, "I'm Superman," as I jumped off the seat and flew into the air. I watched as my mom struggled to breathe, her lips parting less and less as the seconds wore on. My mom was holding my hand as she walked me back home from school, and I told her about all the new friends I'd made. She drew her hand to her neck, then closed her eyes for the last time. She was reading me a bedtime story, doing all the silly voices of my favorite characters, her lifeless body, as the paramedics tried to revive her. My first day of middle school, she was saying, "I'll always be here for you." I opened my eyes to see my mom stomping Mordesar to bits. More and more of him was disappearing at each blow, but she didn't stop until there was nothing left. She turned to me, still laying in my bed of pain. She put her hands on my chest, and then we were floating back up to the clouds. The pain faded away until there was nothing left. "Mom," I said, "I miss you so much. I'm so sorry. I have so many questions." "I know," she said, her voice like silk, "but I'm the one who's sorry. I'm sorry I left you. I wish I could come back. I don't want to live without you. Can I stay with you, wherever we are?" "No, not yet, not for a long time. You need to take care of your sister." "Okay, I will, but don't leave yet." Her voice was already beginning to fade. "I have too. I don't have much strength left. I don't know what happens if you what? I don't know. I feel like I'm fading, like I'm dying again." There were so many questions I wanted to ask, so many things I wanted to say. I fought for words, but nothing seemed worth saying except, "I love you. I love you too, Davy. Please, remember me for all the things I showed you. Remember me for happiness and the good times. Remember me for how much I loved you. Remember me for the fact that I'll be waiting when it's your time. Don't remember me for my death. Remember that I'll always be there for you. Remember that I'll always be watching." "I will," I said, and before I could say anything else she was gone, and I was waking up. Miraculously, everyone involved in the accident survived. My doctor said that it was the single biggest miracle he'd seen in his entire medical career. As for Grandma, she died of a heart attack before the accident even happened. I think we all know the truth about that. I don't blame my grandma for what happened. I know that she was only trying to do what she thought was right. I try to think about the good times. When it comes to both of them, the laughs, the fun, and the love, I smile. Whenever I think about them, it's been 10 years since they passed, and it isn't always easy. But in those dark nights, when I'm lying awake thinking of their deaths, Mordesar, and the accident, I tell myself to think of the joy she brought me in my life, not the pain that her death caused. I know that my mom will always be there for me. She's always watching.